if you're a baseball person and you'd like to see the different ways the game could be played, they've come up with I think, an exciting version of baseball. So enjoy, please.
Thank you.
All right, thanks, Jerry. Might let a couple more trickle in before we get going.
So as Gary mentioned, I'm a high school math teacher. So this game kind of came out of what I do as a math teacher. So, and Grant's going to share a little how he met me and how we got each other. My name is Daniel Jones. I'm a math teacher.
And my name is Grant Moore, and I'm a vintage baseball enthusiast.
And we're going to present on what we call
Can you speak up just a little bit?
I'll try.
Yeah.
I'm a soft-spoken person. 21st century time. Okay, so Pine Tar was quoting John Thorne. So in 2011, John Thorne wrote this book, Baseball and Garden Eden. I'm not going to be talking about this book, but Baseball and Garden Eden, the book is about the history of baseball. And he's kind of dismantling the myth, the Abner Doubleday myth of the origins of baseball. And if you read John Thorne's writings, he talks about the Massachusetts game quite a bit. He doesn't get into a lot of detail. But he's a fan of the game. He's very fond of the game. And he talks about why in several of his books. So I'm going to read just the first couple sentences in the second chapter of this particular book that he wrote in 2011. So in this book, he actually quotes a particular poem by Robert Frost. Most people know this poem. It's called The Road Not Taken. And so John Thorne makes a comparison between the New York game and the Massachusetts game as these two roads. The Massachusetts game being the road less taken, or the road not taken. So let me just read from John Thorne. Okay, here's the actual part of the poem that he quotes. So two roads diverged in a yellow wood. And sorry I could not travel both. And being one traveler, long I stood, and looked down one as far as I could, to where it bent in the undergrowth. We're not taken by Robert Frost. Then John Thorne says, in baseball history, two versions of the early game have come down to us, known as the New York game and the Massachusetts game. The former was a straight path to the future, America's cricket. The latter, richer in variation and possibility, an evolutionary dead end. It is by no means certain that the survivor was the superior version. So in his language, he's invoking theory of evolution, where you have the survival of the fittest. And so he knows that the New York game survived, and he gives various reasons for why it survived, but he doesn't necessarily think that it's a better game that survived. And so we're going to talk about why we think this game has a place in vintage baseball, not just the Massachusetts game, but also 21st century town ball. And we'll talk about why we took that route and kind of went as far down the path as we could, not just at the beginning of the path, but as far down as we could. And we'll talk about the journey as far as how we got there. So that's what we're talking about today. Okay, so I'll be talking more at the beginning. Grant will come a little later. So I'm going to tell just a really quick my story as far as how this all came about. So I grew up, I was born in Wisconsin, and when I was 5, my parents moved to Taiwan as missionaries. They were there for 20 years. And so Taiwan is big in baseball. Wisconsin, Minnesota, where my roots are, is also really big in baseball. So baseball is a big part of my life growing up. So in the summers, I'll come back and play baseball all the time. My plan was to play college baseball at Bethel College. I attended Bethel College. I played varsity soccer. But when it was time to try out for baseball, I actually ended up breaking my finger right before tryouts. And I probably still could have played, but when I broke my finger, it caused me to really think a lot about my priorities and about what I want to do with my life, as well as I started thinking about the game of baseball itself. Being in Taiwan, I had been exposed to cricket. I didn't play cricket in Taiwan, but I'd been exposed to it because we had people from South Africa, other countries that played cricket. And I ended up starting a cricket club at Bethel College instead of playing baseball. What attracted me to cricket in particular, because when I was thinking about baseball, actually this game could be improved on. How could baseball be a better game than this? In particular, I didn't really like the foul territory aspect of baseball. It's something that's so ingrained in our game in the United States with baseball, the idea of the foul territory, and the reasons why the foul territory was invented. But I was really attracted to batting, as a cricket player, and just turning around and hitting the ball backwards, just kind of opening up the mind, like, hey, there's other options here. You can hit the ball that way, not just that way all the time. So I loved the game of cricket, and I fell in love with cricket so much that I ended up just kind of abandoning baseball altogether and played cricket with the cricket club that I started. And fast forward, I became a math teacher in Fresno, California. Somehow I ended up in California, even though I have my roots there. But I started a cricket club, and so we played, I think, 5 years of cricket, and it was a really successful intramural cricket program. Kids loved cricket. It was just a really, really good time. One day, my supervisor came to me and said, "Hey, look, your cricket club is really popular at the school, and you guys play every spring. Can you guys come up with a sport to play in the fall and winter?" I'll see what I can do. So I walked away from his office, and 10 minutes later, I got the idea. So I came back to my advisor and I said, "I'm going to teach an elective class entitled Origins of the American Pastime." I was just getting back into thinking about baseball and thinking about, what I missed about baseball, because cricket is fun because you hit the ball any direction, but one of the coolest parts about baseball is base running, right? In cricket, you just run, those who know cricket, you just run back and forth. It's kind of boring that way, even though you can hit the ball backwards. I mean, with baseball, you got the hit and run play. I mean, you got the double steal. There's just so much more for the base running in baseball that cricket didn't have. So I was like, I'm gonna see if I can look to past games, see if I can find something that scratches that itch for me. I was looking for a game, frankly, that had the base running of baseball and the openness of cricket. I said, I wonder if there's a game like that. So I gave my students, there were 20 students in the class, I gave them an assignment. I said, you guys are in pairs, you guys are going to research 10 different bat ball games. Each of you is going to research one bat and ball game that was played either in our history or in different places in the world. So Finnish baseball came up, and there's some others that were really, really interesting games. But on the second day of the class, one of my students, Edison Giles, I won't quote him on that, he showed us how to play the Massachusetts game of baseball, which is erroneously referred to as town ball. And we'll talk about why that's the case a little bit in this talk. But so we learned it as town ball, but it's the Massachusetts game of baseball. And it didn't matter what game we played after that with my students. Everyone kept coming back to the Massachusetts game of baseball, myself included. I'm like, holy cow, this game is so fun. The Massachusetts version of baseball, there's no foul balls, and the base running is just wild. And so we were hooked on the game. I said to myself, I think I found the game that my supervisor was looking for. We're going to play this game as the fall counterpoint to cricket. And fast forward, it became much more popular than cricket to the point where the students were asking me to stop doing cricket at the school. That's how much they enjoyed the Massachusetts game of baseball. Now, did you want to add anything to that quick before?
Not really. The next part is just how I met you.
Okay.
That's the next slide.
That's the next slide?
Yeah.
Perfect time.
Okay. So, for quick context, that all started in 2012. So that was about 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And then I met him only 3 years ago in 2019. I was finishing my sophomore year of college at a university outside of Portland, Oregon called George Fox University. My family had recently moved to the town that's located called Newburgh, hence our team name, Newburgh Quakers. My younger brother was attending the school that he had since moved to and was teaching at in Newburgh from Fresno. And my brother only went to that school for 1 year in the 6th grade. And we have very little overlap, but my brother dragged me to this game that was called Town Ball, and it didn't seem very attractive or appealing off of the name or anything else, but I eventually went and thought, okay. And then I went, and we were playing outside in the summer in June 2019 at this particular field right there by the river. And I had more fun playing that than any other type of baseball style before. I had played a couple of years of baseball in the 5th and 6th grade in local leagues and stuff. I had done a little bit here and there, but like most people in my age demographic in the United States, baseball was kind of not the thing. It wasn't in vogue in the same way that it would have been 1, 2, 3 generations prior, even as recent as you guys. So I played the game, I really liked it. I got to meet Daniel, and then we put our heads together and wanted to figure out how to spread the game starting at my school. So following that point, at my university, I held pickup games once a Saturday in the fall semester, and we just kept going and going.
George Fox.
Right, which I mentioned before. And we've been doing games there for over 2 years, and finally I believe we have official club status now. That's false on the slide there. I didn't think it was ready yet, but we do have club status there now. And then my family moved to Hillsdale, Michigan later in 2019. I finished school out there, and then I came back here in May of last year. So I've been graduating. I work remote, and I do HR for a trucking company, but I wanted to see how town ball might fare at a place out here. And before we moved, I didn't even know that the Midwest was such a hotbed of vintage baseball. Michigan and Ohio have the most teams in the country from what I hear. Well, that's convenient. So I have been appreciating getting to know people like Corky and many others like yourselves over Facebook mainly, and then officially now in the flesh here at the conference. But yeah, I'm hoping to keep this going out in anywhere in Michigan for anybody who wants to play, anyone in Ohio, Indiana. I will say most of the activities happening in California and Oregon right now. We'll get to that later, but that's just a brief history between him and I.
Thank you. Okay. So throughout this talk, I just want to be really clear about something. There are two games we're referring to, because we're kind of proponents of both games. There's Massachusetts baseball, and there's 21st century town ball, which we call town ball. What was it? I mean, we were just like in love with this game, all of us. And these are the aspects that we love. I mean, first of all, no foul balls. That was my personal, like, oh, I'm in heaven, right? How many people know about the Massachusetts game? Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, so some of this will be review, right? So in the Massachusetts game, there's no baselines. So when we play town ball, that rule comes in really handy. I mean, it's like, you gotta run around second, right? And you're down by 1 run, you gotta run around, in our case, 4th stake, and you wanna get to 5th stake. That guy on third will just take off in the center field. It's just so wild. Like, we'll be chasing them, and then maybe do decoy plays and all this kind of thing, and try to throw the runner out going home. So John Thorne, actually, this is our first quote. We have several quotes from him. He loves this game. He says, "I think the New York game won out through superior public relations because I've played recreation games of the Massachusetts game, and it is a fantastically fun, we agree, game both to play and watch." John Thorne says, the New York game in many measures is inferior, right? He doesn't believe that the superior version necessarily survived. We can't assume that. He says, in the Massachusetts game, you did not have to stay on the base paths while you were running. So you could lead your opponents, exactly what we found, on a merry chase into the outfield and beyond. So that's one of our favorite aspects. As a teacher, I was like the only one among my students. I said, hey, we probably shouldn't be pegging the runners. And they're like, Mr. Jones, can we just try pegging the runners? I'm like, okay. And after just a few games, like, there's just some crazy like plays that happen with pegging the runners. I mean, it doesn't hurt because this ball's soft.
Yeah, we won't test that on you guys. Gotcha, Cliff.
Yeah, this is actually the ball. This is actually the ball that we. No, this isn't the ball that we started with, but we'll talk about it later.
Yeah. Demonstration.
Yeah. So we just found so many instances in when pegging the runners was so good, and after just like a few games, we're like, okay, well, we're keeping pegging the runners. It's just such a great game. So we kept as much of the Massachusetts game as we could. So we want to stay true to vintage baseball. And we're going to talk about this in a second, but we tweaked the parts that needed to be changed in order for the game to survive, right? Because John Thornton said it didn't survive, and there's a reason why it didn't survive. And there are several reasons why it didn't survive. But one of the reasons is because it actually wasn't finished. It hadn't completed as a game. As you guys know, baseball changed, evolved. Imagine if baseball had stopped, right? Then we look at the rules like, oh, that's the only way to play baseball. Right? Actually, no, there's several versions as it goes through until we get to modern baseball. The Massachusetts game didn't have that opportunity to go through that process, right? According to Thorne, because of superior public relations, but I think it's also because of some of the rules that are in there, and we'll talk about why that's the case and why they had to be changed and how we changed those. So we kept these aspects because they're our favorite aspects to it. Okay, 1 out, all out. You know, some people are like, that seems so strange. In baseball, there's 3 outs, right? In an inning. Town ball is 1 out. It actually adds so much to the game. because it's not like you're sitting there counting the outs. It makes the game really fast paced. If you don't score, next team's up. It actually really works well. And one of the reasons is because of these last two. There's no inning limit in town ball. You might be like, in the Massachusetts game or in town, there's no inning limit. You might say, like, how's the game end? In the original version of the Massachusetts game, according to the 1858 Dedham rules, you had to score 21 runs to win. But there were versions that played up to 100 runs, up to 50 runs. 21 still seemed high for us, and we'll talk about that also. But what it does, like, we didn't realize this when we started, right? But if you think about baseball and some of the greatest moments of baseball history, think Kirk Gibson, think Carlton Fisk, right? The game-winning home run, the game-winning play, the walk-off hit, right? Half of all games of the Massachusetts game and town ball have to end in some kind of walk-off play because you're playing up to a certain number of runs. The other half would be if the visiting team won. It's crazy. It's just like we have so many good memories of this game. Me and my students and I, both games, because we have walk-off plays where the game ended at this point. And it's just, if I could encapsulate what we've done, what we've experienced, which I can't, we just had so much fun with this game. And there's a lot of quotes about why this game's so much fun, but that's to be honest. So those are the things that we kept. I got it. With the Massachusetts games, these are our favorite aspects. I want to now, talking a lot, I want to talk about what was missing about the game. There were 21 rules in the original, 1858 Dedham rules, and according to those rules, which is where the game stopped, this is from our perspective what was missing. And there is some opinion in this, of course, right? Because you have to use your imagination to decide what would have happened if you had taken that road that you never took, because we didn't take the road. So this is our belief. So what's missing in the Massachusetts game? First of all, the pitching distance is too close. It's 35 feet. It works if you're playing Little League. You got myself or him, he throws harder than I do. It works out. 35 feet fastball, you can hit it, but once it gets too fast, it just becomes unplayable. The game won't survive long term. It won't survive as it is. So right away, it needs to be changed somehow. Okay, so that's one factor. Number two, in the rules, there's no incentive to run. You guys know about this in baseball history. They changed the rules. I don't know how many balls before they had to walk in the original versions. I don't actually know all those details, but the game changed for baseball as far as giving the incentive for the batter to swing. In the Massachusetts game, there's no built-in, according to the rules, incentive for the batter to swing. So you can stand there all day and never swing. Right? We're like, okay, we need to change that somehow. So we kind of said, what would be the best way to change that? And we'll talk about how we decided to change that. And we think this is the best option. And it really works. Number three, it's very difficult to score runs. There was one game that was played that was supposed to be played to 100 runs, but after a couple days of playing, they said, forget it, we're playing to 50. So even that, then it took a couple days to play. This was a really key component that if you have a game that plays to a certain number of runs, like the Massachusetts game, you want to keep that aspect in the Massachusetts game. You don't want to play inning limits because it takes away from the feel of the game. If you're going to have this factor of inningless baseball, you have to find creative ways by which to make it a little bit easier to score without taking away the flavor of the game. And we found some creative ways to do that. And the cool thing is we found a precedent for every single rule change we've ever made, except for the Fibonacci sequence, so we'll talk about that later. For every single rule change we've made, we found a precedent for it in some version of vintage baseball. So our game is really 80% the Massachusetts game, 15% variations of stool ball, crickets, and actual town ball. There was a game called town ball, and we'll talk about that too. And 5% invention on one aspect, and he's going to address what that one aspect is and why we need to have that one aspect to make this game work. So it's not like we're just making stuff up. We're actually researching, looking back, saying, okay, what does baseball have to offer in its past to make this game called 21st Century Town Ball? And we think this could have still happened, knowing the variations that existed even before the Massachusetts game. The batters don't have enough control. That's directly related to it's difficult to score runs. In baseball, if you hit the ball, you have to run. It's interesting, but imagine the original versions of town ball before the Massachusetts game, the original versions of the town ball, which were based on old Pat. If you hit the ball, like in cricket, you didn't have to run until the third strike. Think about that. Think about what that does for the batter. You hit the ball right back to the pitcher, strike one. You swing and miss, catcher catches it, strike two. Or you hit a long ball, score 4 runners, strike two, but you're still batting. Think about the RBI advantage you can have as a batter if you're a good hitter with that rule of not having to swing, not having to run if you hit the ball, which goes all the way back to the very original version of baseball in this country, Old Cat. That was where baseball started. In the United States, not in Europe, of course. There's versions of baseball in Europe, but in the United States, Old Cat was the original version. That was a rule that children made up. And it went on into town ball, but it didn't carry over into the Massachusetts game or the New York game. So that's part of the 15% that we had to change, based on precedent, not just making stuff up, which is really cool. I mean, the history here is just like, in my opinion, mind-blowing. It's just fun. The base paths are a bit awkward. They're not that bad. This is kind of cool. I think the New York game, baseball, is better. I'm a math teacher. Has better geometry than this. I think this is interesting. But the diamond is just so cool, right? So like, okay, we want this game to survive. As a math teacher, I'm thinking, and as a thinker, okay, if I want this game to survive, I want to match the mathematics of the New York game. But I don't want to use the mathematics of the New York game. I want to match it, okay? So I think we can improve upon that. And since we had to move the bases back anyway, it was an opportunity. So I'm going to talk about how we did that and why we did it the way we did in a second. It's the next slide, actually. And I'm going to quote John Thorne again. He seems to be arguing in my favor several times when I read him, so I like him for that reason. So he says, in the end, it was almost certainly no single rule of the Massachusetts game that led to its extinction. 4, impractical provisions may always be changed. So even he admits, and as we know, sometimes you gotta make changes to survive. Okay, I'm still gonna keep talking, so bear with me. Next slide, I talk about what we did to fix the problems that we felt existed in the Massachusetts game. So before I show the next slide, I'll just jump in. Okay, so this is what our game looks like. It's called 21st Century Town Ball. The thing that looks least like the Massachusetts game is the diagram of the field, and I'm going to explain why again. But here we have the batting point. Here's the pitcher's line. Here's first, second, third, fourth, and fifth. Fifth stick. Okay, now since there's no foul balls, it makes sense. I'm a catcher, right? So when I'm playing my position here, it's fun, right? Sometimes I got to throw something out the plate, backhanded.
These are the stakes we use, by the way. Yep.
Yeah, just like in the Massachusetts game, we keep the game as close to the Massachusetts game as possible. So yeah, as a catcher, I'm looking 360 degrees to check all the runners. All potentially 6 runners, right, including the batter. Well, 5, I suppose.
5.
1, 2.
Yeah.
Yeah, 5. So the first thing we changed with base paths. Let me explain why this in particular. So if I can go back. So now we have to move everything back anyway. Now running 30 feet and then running 60 feet, I'm thinking to myself, okay, it's cool because you can get on base easily. You can go 30 feet and then it's easy to get on base but difficult to score. But why 30, then 60, then 60, then 60? That just seems so odd. Like, why would you double it? Why would you go from 30 to 60? It just seems like there's no rationale for that, other than the fact that you're using this particular design, right? Like, why 30, 60? And again, as a math teacher, I'm like, okay, 30, 60, it looks like they're trying to do something where it increases, like it's harder each time as you go along, right? Start with 30, then 60, but then they kind of tap off at 60, top off at 60. So, what I recommended to my students, suggested to the students was, okay, we got 42 feet, then 68 feet, and then 110 feet. And originally when we played the game, we were still thinking the Massachusetts game, our original version was, okay, 42, 68, 110, 68, we stopped there. That's really cool. And it just kind of dawned on me, like, why are we stopping there? You know, thinking outside the box. If you're going 42, 68, 110, you go another 110, you're like, oh my goodness, it makes a perfect square, right? And what you guys don't know is that this actually is not just a random diagram. This is actually a construction that was made by Euclid over 2,000 years ago. This is the construction of the golden ratio. It's a construction of the mean and extreme ratio. It's based on the Fibonacci sequence. So this sequence, 42, 68, 110, is not just random numbers. The 42, which he's going to talk about in more detail now, the 42 is twice 21. The 68 is twice 34. And the 110 is twice 55. And those numbers have some very important significance to them in the history of mathematics. And it makes for a fantastic game of bat and ball. And we'll talk more about that soon. Now, another change we made, I mentioned earlier that the batter never had to swing, right? There's no incentive to swing. We're like, okay, do we do strikes and balls? We're like, no, actually, we think we could do something better than what baseball does. So, what we have is a zone, a lot like wiffle ball. And by the way, this rectangle, assuming the proportions, assuming the size of the ball added to it, is proportional to this particular rectangle here, and there's reason for that too. But if I'm batting,
No problem, the table.
if I'm batting and it's behind me here, right, and I'm taking a wiffle ball, if it comes in and hits the zone, the batter's out like in cricket or like in stool ball. It's the same rule. We stole a lot of rules from vintage baseball games. Hits the zone, it's an out. Now we thought about maybe hits the zone to strike, but the thing is, since there's only one out per inning, if the ball hits the zone, the inning's over, which means the zone never comes into play on the game. It's never in the way. You can't use the zone in the New York style of play, because if you had a zone, think baseball, right? And I get on base, suppose I'm Jackie Robinson, okay? I get all the way to third. I want to steal home, and there's still a batter there. The zone is in the way, because the catcher, right, who's standing back here, there's no way he can tag the runner out, because the zone's in the way. But since we don't return to the batting point, in either town ball or in the Massachusetts game, the zone makes a perfect match for the Massachusetts style of play. So like, let's use it. There's this precedent for it, in stool ball and cricket. Let's use it. There's nothing written about it in the Massachusetts game. There's no rule about the batter having to swing. This is the best option. Let's use it. This is probably what would have happened because they realized that this is the best option. For pickup games, you don't need an umpire to call balls and strikes. Hits the zone, everybody knows, batter's out. Now in the Massachusetts game, for those of you guys who know the game, if you're batting and there's a swing and a miss, it's only a strike if the catcher catches it. So we kept that, again, we kept everything we could in the original Massachusetts game. So if I'm behind the plate catching, I'm still back here because if it's a little bit inside, right, they swing and a miss and I catch the ball, that's a strike. So the catcher still has a role in the Massachusetts version of baseball. Make sense?
Would that have to be on a fly or?
It has to be on a fly. Yeah, there's no one bound. Actually says specifically in the Massachusetts version, all flies have to be caught. There's no one bound. They're like, we're not playing the New York style, we're playing Massachusetts style. Ball has to be caught in the air. That's actually specifically mentioned. So they thought all that through. They just hadn't quite gotten to this yet. Now, stealing first. So we allow for stealing first. In cricket, you can steal first. In various versions of rounders played in Europe, you can steal first. If you're batting and the catcher misses it, you just go. It's necessary because if you're playing to a given number of runs, the game won't end without it. And the cool thing about being able to steal first, if he's pitching, right? Suppose he's looking at a runner that way, right? He's not paying attention, I can just take off. What that does is, as soon as the first pitch of the inning is thrown, for the rest of the inning, the ball is always in play. There's no dead time. It makes for an extraordinarily high-paced game where everybody's constantly alert. Like in baseball, everyone loves Pete Rose, Paul Molitor, right? Because they're always alert. They're always thinking about how I can take another base. I'm on first, ball goes to right, I'm going to third if there's one out. And here's all the mathematical reasons why you do that, right? Town ball, it's just like, you don't have to be Paul Molitor or Pete Rose. Everyone is Paul Molitor and Pete Rose because of how the game it works. There's no sleeping in town ball like there's for a lot of players in baseball. A lot of people just fall asleep playing or watching baseball. Okay, no offense intended, but that's what I found, right? Which is why I kind of fell in love with cricket, which led me to the Massachusetts game, eventually town ball. I'm like, I want a game where I have to think, and town ball's it. And if you play it, we can talk all day, right? If you play it, you see what I mean. It's actually more fun than how I'm describing it. It's just like crazy fun, and people know that. And people talk about it. And my students have so many testimonies that we thought about bringing them. We're like, we can't talk about all that. So yeah, there's just a lot to talk about. Anyway, the batter is not obligated to run to the third strike. We talked about that. That's a rule that comes all the way back from Old Cat. So again, if I have the bases loaded and I'm the best hitter up, right, I'm gonna hit 3 solid line drive before I take off running. Try to knock everybody in, right? And that really makes the game move along. It's perfect. It's a perfect balance of the game. The game has a lot of balance to it. And it's a lot, again, the press is in our vintage baseball. And then John Thorne mentions, he says, the Massachusetts game of baseball was in many ways, again, he says, this is a different quote, in many ways the superior version because first base was so easily reached. We wanted to keep that, hence the 42 feet. People look at that like, that's really close. Yeah, you got a good pitcher, it can be tough to get on, right? You got a good base runner, it's a really interesting dynamic of like, is he gonna go, or is he gonna go, or is he gonna hit the ball? So, because first base was so easily reached, the real action became between the other bases. We wanted to keep that aspect to it. And we believe we've done it with 21st Century Town Ball. Again, we have a lot of experiences with that field. We've been playing now for 10 years. I think it's your turn.
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Okay. Try again. So he's the math guy. I am not the math guy, but I was able to pretty quickly get this under my belt. So don't worry, don't be alarmed when you see this. This pattern that we have here, which I'll briefly go back to, the numbers between the base paths, which we were talking about, were not arbitrary. They're not arbitrary because they come from this particular sequence. In the 13th century, there was this Italian mathematician of the last name of Fibonacci, and he found this crazy phenomena in multiple areas of nature. It's the same algorithmic pattern of numbers. What happens is you take the first number being 0 and you add the result of, so it's like 0 plus 1 is 1, and you take the answer of that and you add it to the prior number. So 1 plus 1 would be 2, and then you take that, add it to the prior number in the sequence, it would be 3, and it's pretty straightforward from there. So that sequence makes a lot of sense, but as far as how he found it in different aspects of, I mean, he found it in the breeding rates of rabbits. That's just kind of bizarre, which is why we use this example here, just to give you a better visual representation of how the algorithm is expressed on kind of in a two-dimensional way. It can also show itself in a three-dimensional way right here. This pattern is basically found in almost all types of flower blooms and sunflowers and other things. And this just gives you a better connection visually to what's going on here. And in our game, this number is not only representing the distances between the bases, but it's also every other aspect of our game. We have 1 out per inning, for example.
We have 1 ball.
We have 2 teams.
You want this light, right?
Yeah.
2 teams? Okay, fine. We got 3 strikes.
5 stakes.
We played an 8 run.
And there's 13 players to a team at a full roster.
21 is twice,
Twice 21.
twice 21 is 42. From home to first is 42 feet.
Twice 34 is 68 feet, which is the distance from first to second.
Twice 55 is the 110, which usually
Third to fourth, fourth to fifth.
And every aspect of 21st Century Town Ball, regardless, is based on the Fibonacci sequence. Even the batter's box itself is a
8 by 5 foot box.
8 by 5 foot box. So I'm still in the batter's box if I'm covering the zone. I'll just be out of the ball. Okay.
So that's how the connection is there.
So why the Fibonacci sequence? I alluded to this earlier. As we know, one of the lures of baseball, besides the fact that it's a fantastic game, it's a bat and ball game, it doesn't learn bat and ball games, is that the founders of baseball, right, they kept mathematics in mind, right? First of all, they made it a square. Geometrically, amazing, right? We love squares. In baseball, everything's about the number 3 and 9, right? 3 sets of 3, which is 9. There's 3 strikes, 3 outs. 9 innings. Originally it was 7 innings, and they had this huge debate as to whether it be 7 or 9. I'm sure the mathematics of whether to do 7 or 9 came into play. They settled on 9. Probably because of the 3 plus 3 plus 3. There's the 90-foot bases, 9 players per side. There was some debate about that too, further down. And the World Series was originally a 9-game series. So we're like, okay, we need to not copy the mathematics of baseball, we need to match it. And so we did our best using the Fibonacci sequence since it fits so well with the Massachusetts game. So you can see the comparison of the two versions, right? Sure, why not? Here's the Massachusetts version. It's not bad, right? Considering all the possibilities with mathematics, when all those are considered, I think this is better. And just the fact that you can run back behind home is really cool too, and it opens up the whole game of baseball. And this particular diagram I mentioned before is from Euclid's Elements. It's exactly the same. So Euclid, he was trying to prove that you can construct the golden ratio, the Fibonacci sequence, geometrically. So here's the beginning of this proof is right here. I'm not going to go through it because it's not math class, right? So here's the beginning of this proof. He's trying to construct the golden ratio, and you can see it looks suspiciously like a town ball field.
So this next part, this is an excerpt from a town hall video we had on Zoom just a few months back. And in here you actually get to see some of the game footage and some commentary on that. It's about 6 to 7 minutes, but we figured you guys have seen enough graphs, we want you to see how the game's actually played.
And see people talking about the game.
Yep. And if you ever on Corky's calls in the last few months, you're going to hear a familiar voice when the video starts. It'll just take a couple seconds.
So as I understood the game, town ball, Boston Common, back in the day, right? The New York game was thriving in some other way. Everyone played. If there were 50 people, 25 versus 25. If there were 100 people, I read about games. There were 200, 100 versus 100. If there was 77, you'd split it up, right? And that's what I think was cool about this is like you're talking about breaking it down to like, fundamentals. Let's have the fans play. And any of you vintage people out there, like myself, who played a vintage ball, 1864 ball, whatever, I would say half our teammates of 22 this year came off the field. People watching and said, I want to go and play. Yeah. And I think that's what's cool about town balls. People just actually walk off the field in their skirts or in their whatever finery and actually join the game.
Yeah, that original dimension of the 30-60-60, that's the game that Will and I were both playing in that very original game that we played, Town Ball. And we said, okay, we felt like it should have been pushed back a little bit, and so that's where we came up with 42, 68, 110, 110. And we actually used a Fibonacci sequence in the bases. I don't know if you're aware of that, but the 42, 68, 110, that's part of the Fibonacci sequence. I know that Elijah and Olivia will both appreciate that because they're both math majors. And then actually every aspect of 20% in town ball is now based on the Fibonacci sequence. For example, we play first team to 8-run wins, a win by 5 capped at 13. 8, 5, and 13 are all Fibonacci numbers. The 3 strikes, the 1 out, the 5 states. Literally every aspect of the game is now based on the Fibonacci sequence. We kind of borrowed from baseball in that they have the perfection of mathematics in their game. We said, okay, how can we have that similar theme to make town ball work? So here's a game we played in Hillsdale, actually.
This isn't Michigan.
Oh, this isn't Michigan?
This
It's in
is.
Michigan, yeah.
This was back in October. We had about 5 or 6 games.
42 feet, then 68 feet right there. That's a double.
Jones, can you explain why we have a catcher right behind the zone?
I can. Again, as Jeffrey knows, in town ball, if the batter swings, it's only a strike if the catcher catches it, right? So you got to have a catcher back there to hang on to the ball. But in 21st century town ball, if it hits the zone, you're out. Just one time hitting the zone, you're out. And we do that because the zone would interfere with gameplay otherwise. And since there's only 1 out per inning, it makes sense that once it hits the zone, inning's over. The zone never interferes with gameplay that way, ever. It's such a beautiful balance, I think, to have the zone. Really works well with the Massachusetts version of play.
Well, and it really seems to incentivize swinging too, which it adds so much to the game where you have to actually protect the zone versus you just get penalized for having the zone or for having a strike thrown at you, whereas now it's the ultimate penalty of ending the inning, which incentivizes that swinging, right? I love that.
The way, who is it that always says, Grant says this, high risk, high reward, that kind of game.
In the game I played, it went on to the 100 scale. Whoever scored 100 points ended the match.
Yeah.
At that moment, it was grand. We had every age, every person, out on the field rejoicing, and then, moved on with our day. It was really, I can see how this brings value to people.
Yeah.
But we never used a zone. That to me is more like wiffle ball. I love it.
Yeah.
I absolutely love it.
That's exactly what we got for football.
Yeah.
Even the zone itself is a golden rectangle, by the way. It's based on the proportions of the human body, all the Fibonacci sequences of the human body. We took the numbers and boiled it down, and incidentally, the width is the same width as the home plate in baseball. That was a coincidence, so we were really happy about that.
So I will say,
Go ahead.
I will say one of the things that really drew me to the game in the long run is how versatile the game is, right? So I mean, we've seen a couple videos here of two very different locations in which the game is being played, right? And yet it seems to work quite well in both scenarios, and has a fairly different feel of play in those different scenarios, and yet still feels like town ball itself. Right, so I think one of the things I particularly love about this game is that it can be played in such differing locations, and due to the rules being as well thought out as they are, that it's able to fit all those different locations. Whereas, like, that was one of the hard things with baseball. Whenever I wanted to play baseball with friends, you needed the clear diamond shape because you needed to have clear foul lines, right? Whereas with town ball, if you have a square field that's big enough, you're good to go, which means the soccer field works, a football field works, a large open space works, a pavilion works. And so that's one of the things I really love about this game.
Yeah, and one of the other things is that it also just works really well indoors too. Like we have an indoor tournament coming up here at Veritas, just a 3-team tournament, 12 games total, 8 per team.
Indoor is a lot more like the Massachusetts game. We only have 4 bases, just like.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's indoor. Here we go.
Yeah, it's really fast paced. I love it.
There's a couple spots in Newburgh where I was hoping to organize an indoor town ball game. Really hard to find a indoor venue right now, but this looks like extremely fun. Though, George Fox folks will try to maybe get that started next semester.
I could share all day. Let's get on with the agenda.
And there we go. So, as Finnish baseballers at large, obviously the thing that brings us all together is our mission to bring people back to the game in some way, shape, or form, back before we have the modern game that we have today. And this, we wanted to kind of just use this as a metaphor here because the mission is beautiful. It's a hard thing to watch though, seeing so many people closer to my age just really fall out of interest with baseball, with other things. And one thing that gives a good example of this is just a brief quote from an article called Strike 3, Baseball is Dead by a columnist named C.J. Kelly. The baseball fields near my house lay empty on hot summer days, except for the occasional church softball games. The park that surrounds them is even devoid of kids most of the year. flocks of doves and the occasional bald eagle circle the area. The rapids of the White River are all you can hear. The sound of a ball hitting a bat, whether it's wood, aluminum, and even wiffle, that was so much part of my childhood, and I don't see it today. It's missing. You're more likely to hear skateboards rumbling down the hill leading to the park. I personally can't remember the last time I saw a kid walking anywhere with a baseball glove. So, look around. There's a certain age demographic in the room, and I'm a bit of the outlier here. If vintage baseball hopefully can continue to bring people back to the spirit of why we all love it so much, that means that at some point you'll need younger blood in there. And what we have found with our game is that we share just the same mission as everyone here, but our vision is a little more pinpointed to this younger age demographic, which we've had pretty incredible success with over the last 10 years. And we'll hit 10 years this fall. And as we go into explaining more about our hopes with that, I'm going to let Daniel take on the next slide here. But I just wanted to say, we love what everything vintage baseball is about. Town ball is not meant to replace anything. It's simply meant to broaden the stage, if you will. It's meant to keeping on with the spirit of things and finding a way to make that attractive to people who are a little closer to my age. So I'll have you come up, Jones, for the next slide.
Just a little bit of tidying up loose ends. Again, alluded to this earlier. Why the name Town Ball? Going back to nomenclature as far as what game was called what, is a little bit of a messy job. And a lot of it came down to regional terms. If someone from the South traveled to Massachusetts, for example, they'd probably see the Massachusetts games and say, oh, that's Town Ball, right? And if someone from New York went to Ohio and saw them playing Old Cat, they'd say, oh, that's some version of baseball, right? So to some degree, the different terms for the games was based upon the region that you lived. Not exclusively, but that there is some truth to that. So, as you guys know, we spell baseball with two words, right? It's vintage baseball, that's how it was spelled. When we say baseball one word, we're referring to a modern game. It's like the modern telos. The ultimate end of baseball, right? This is what people decided is the best version of baseball. So we've done the same thing. We don't call ourselves Town Ball two words, we call ourselves Town Ball one word, because we're intending to make Town Ball a national game. We're intending to take on Major League Baseball someday. We're intending to make this a game where it's like a two-choice thing, just like there is, Ultimate Frisbee. It took a long time to catch on, but once it caught on, or Spike Ball. We're intending for Town Ball, one word, to become a national game. So modern adaptation, Town Ball is to baseball, as Town Ball is to baseball, regional terms. This is a quote from Henry Philpott from A Little Boy's Game with the Ball. Just want to hit home what I alluded to earlier, and this is about the fact that you. First of all, I cut it out, but this is what's cut out. This quote, first of all, conclusively states, and Chadwick actually says the same thing, has a similar quote, that Town Ball, two words, was directly derived from Old Cat, and the fact that Old Cat, you didn't have to run to the third strike, and therefore in Town Ball you also didn't have to run to the third strike. Because some people might say like, oh, you're just making up rules. No, this is from actual Town Ball, not the Massachusetts game, but Town Ball. It says, this we used to call Old Cat. Bases were now introduced. When the batter had struck the ball 3 times, he must run. There it is. Town Ball was plainly evolved out of these cat games, for it retained all of the rules, including this particular rule. So that is a rule of the original version of Town Ball. And so we like the name Town Ball because, it fits all the way back to really ancient times, right? Back to Old Cat, and also it's a good counterpart, in my opinion, to baseball.
Baseball, one word, is already taken.
Yeah. Unfortunately.
Yeah, bummer. So, as I expressed before, I know a lot of the area where vintage baseball is doing a lot is right here where we are, and then of course you got a lot going on in New England and some other parts in California, but we want to play with anybody and anybody who's interested, indiscriminate. So, whoever, wherever you are, we love to play the game with you, especially because it's as versatile as my friend on the call was talking about. And Jones briefly touched on this earlier, but there's many different equalizers in the game that allow for different skill and talent levels to be able to play with each other and for everyone to bring as much value. It's not just about being super athletic or just super clever. You need both.
Or super strong.
Or super strong. You can hit the ball, choose not to run on it. You can bat around your slow guys. Get them up there first and have your good guys hit them around 3 times before the guys to run.
If you can't hit, but you can run, you can still first base.
Without
So-
having ever hitting the ball.
And if you got a really good hitter that wants to shine, you can do that by getting people on base and then putting them up. So there's a very, in academia we call it a very high ceiling and very low floor, where a lot of people can be very successful in town ball. But if you're good, you can really shine, and it doesn't take away from everybody else. It actually adds to, because you're helping those people get around the bases. So town ball, it's really a game for a lot of people. And that's what we found. We've had so many friends of his, like Grant's like, for a year, come to town ball, come to town ball. I'm not into baseball, come to town ball, it's not like baseball. No, I just don't want to do it. Fine, I'll come, just get you off my back. And now Andrew's one of our, Andrew and Ethan are one of our strongest supporters, like, holy cow, this game's really fun, why didn't you tell me? It's not like baseball at all, that's what we told you, so.
You guys understand the difficulty with recruiting,
Yeah.
so, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
The next slide.
Oh, question, you want to go ahead?
Why do you use 5 stakes?
To finish off the Fibonacci sequence, because if we had 4 stakes, we would have stopped here. We want to go all the way around so we can get that Euclid figure. Does that make sense?
Yes, and is the 5th stake a home base?
Yep.
It is. 5th stake is a home base. There's actually a precedent for that. There are versions of baseball played in Ohio that use five stakes. So it's not anything incredibly new. What's new is just the fact that we use the Fibonacci sequence to find where the stakes go. But there's definitely precedent for 5 stakes in individual baseball.
So how can you be put out? All usual ways?
Yeah, so in the Massachusetts game, you can peg the runners, right? Same with this game.
Hey, wow.
You're out.
You're out.
So if you
Besides that,
if the ball is,
Sorry, had to do it to you.
if the ball hits the zone, you're out. You can strike out, right? And sometimes a strikeout turns into a force out at first, and the 3rd strike, if you hit the ball, you have to run.
Yeah.
So there's a zone out, there's a strikeout,
there's a force out?
there's a force out on the 3rd strike.
Okay.
Because on the 3rd strike, you have to run, right? So if I hit the 3rd strike, what's strike 3? They can tag the stake. It's not 2 outs.
But are there force outs then? So
Yeah.
if there's a runner on first already,
Yeah.
there's a force out at second.
Yeah.
Same as.
Same as in baseball. In baseball, it's with 2 outs, and town ball is with 2 strikes. Yeah.
I might be wrong, but you made it seem like, let's say, okay, bases are loaded, you're up, you hit a ball 500 feet. Why wouldn't you run, even though it's at the sky? You would run, right?
Not necessarily.
Why not?
Because
If
you
the
can
ball's-
do it again.
Because you can do it again.
Well,
You don't
why-
have to
if
because
you're gonna
there's-
hit if you're gonna hit a grand
not
slam,
until
why
the
wouldn't you
3rd
take
strike.
that?
Because the bases are so far. You have to run
Okay.
440 feet. If I hit the ball that far, I'd only get to 3rd.
Oh, well,
And the runner
Okay.
on first might get to 4th. I might want to bat one more time.
you think you can hit it further? Because you think, or,
You, you can hit a triple and then hit a single to get the last guy in.
oh,
You
okay.
can
If
mix
there's, if there's nobody on, you probably want to run.
Yeah, nobody
Yeah.
on.
But if there's somebody on, you can
Okay,
keep, you can
I'm-
keep
I'm so not used to that
swinging
thinking,
through your
right.
time.
You wanna buy them
Yeah.
time. You wanna buy them running time.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
It's all strategy. A lot
Okay.
of strategy. Oh, one more thing we didn't mention.
Oh.
I totally forgot in the.
We'll get to you, don't worry.
Is in cricket, right? After everybody bats, right? Then you play what they refer to as another inning. So their inning is when everybody bats, and in the 2nd inning you can shuffle the batting order. So we stole that. So in town ball, and it's necessary because if you're gonna get people around, you don't want to have your best hitter up lead off, right? So after everybody's batted once, the next round you can shuffle the batting order. Like, okay, you're up first this inning, but not this inning, but this round. So you can't bat 2 more times than somebody else. Obviously, you don't want to do that. But once everybody's batted, the next thing you shuffle it around, and it works for RBIs that way.
Gives you a lot more control for in-game decisions when you need to make a quick decision
It's-
of changing somebody.
It's really a manager's dream
Yeah.
because there's so many decisions he has to make.
Is that per time around the order, or is that
Per time around the order.
per at bat?
Per time around the order.
So if you bat around in
Yeah.
I don't even have innings, but if you bat around in an inning,
Yeah.
right? After you get through your 13 guys,
No. Everybody has to bat before you can do it again. So-
That's what I'm saying, so you
Yeah.
can gather your 13 guys and then change your order,
That's
or
right.
even if you're still, you haven't made your out yet.
That's right. That's right. So there's two things going on simultaneously. There's innings and rounds.
Yeah.
Gotta keep track.
Frank, I had a question.
So, a couple things, but quick. First of all, you got this ball. This is the ball you're using, this style,
Yeah.
for sure. I saw the pitching in the video was overhand. Is it always overhand, underhand, sidearm, or is
Always
that
overhand.
restrict? Always overhand.
That's all the way back to the Massachusetts game. That
Really?
was
So back then, overhand.
Yeah, they were. I got the feeling they're like, we're not going to do it like Massachusetts, like New York people. We're going to do it our own way. They were fast pitched from the beginning, and the reason it works is because there's no foul territory, right? In baseball, I would argue slow pitch works better because the idea is to put the ball into play. But in the Massachusetts game, if you miss the ball, it's still in play because you got fielders back there.
Next thing, my bat maker made me a Tomball batting set, and it really looks like a wooden wiffle ball bat. And I saw that, but I saw the video, there was kind of modern bats. What does the bat look like, or should it be more like that style that he made for me?
Great question. We're not there yet. We're just trying to get people to play the game at this point.
I know those bats, they never use the right ones.
That's right. That's right. Yeah,
Well, I know, so you could do that, but you could do 21st century with regular clothes and a cool bat.
We could, and that's why we use the vintage gloves. I mean, we try to use vintage gloves because it goes back not to the 19th century, but the early 20th century. Shows Joe Jackson days. Those gloves are really cool, and they work well for town ball.
We know we're on time, but yeah.
I had a question. You said, you know, even if you miss the balls, it's still a live ball. That means any runners can.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, okay.
You can steal anytime you want, so, yep,
Always like.
always live, the ball's never
Gotta be
dead.
alert.
Not for me, because I have relatively good eyesight. So what I do is I'll put my eye line below the top, so I can see it clearly, and then just catch the ball.
You have a mask with
I do.
a chest protector?
No, just mask. You don't need a chest protector. The ball's not hard enough for that, plus the net. But you definitely need a mask. Otherwise, you get a black eye on a foul ball.
So flat ball's an out, right?
Yeah.
Yep, flyouts are illegal.
I saw the players out there, the pitcher and the catcher. Do you have a first baseman, second baseman, third baseman?
When we have enough
fourth
people.
baseman?
Yeah.
Because, I mean, they were just
Yeah.
kind of all over.
Yeah, about 5 years ago, I developed position names for all of them. Yeah, we have a catcher, and then we call it a backup. We thought about calling it the behinds, to match this baseball, but backup seemed, people caught on to it better. We have first base, second base, we have a cover, we have a shortstop, a long stop, we have center, left, and right. And then usually whoever's playing fourth will kind of just rover around, because usually there's not a lot of balls that go that direction. But our slogan is, who's on fifth?
We're at about 11, so thank you so much for coming.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well done.
Oh, yeah,
Very unique.
website.
Yep. And our personal contact information is on the next slide.
Yeah, take a photo.
So, yeah, get a snap photo of that.
I got one.
Get that going.